Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of You Know It, Form Check Friday. Now, if you like these videos, we're going to be moving some of this content to a more predominantly streaming media. So head over to twitch.tv/Calgary Barbell. Right now, because we're locked down, we're going to be streaming twice a week. We got our guests, we got our coaches, who are guests on each week, and it's going to rotate through Taylor, Danny, Derek, and Dylan, all of course hosted by my mustache wearing self. I told you I was going to do it. Anyways, let's dive on in. We're starting off with Patrick, who we left off with last time. So Patrick, apparently I found out after the fact, is a bit of a TikTok celebrity. Some people were like, "Oh man, I recognize him from TikTok." And of course, I have no idea because I've never been on TikTok, nor do I even really understand the platform. But hey, if you're out there, Patrick, keep doing the good work. And I don't know, deadlifting on TikTok probably is a platform that could use more deadlifts. So in terms of his technique, he says he's Australian. That has nothing to do with his technique. I just like to give people's locales a shout out. First time giving sumo a go. He's pulled 300 conventional. This is 272.5 for 4 beltless. He says he notices his hips are pretty high, but he doesn't feel like that gives him much issue. Now, obviously, if you're a strong conventional puller, which obviously, 300 kilos at 76 kilos body weight, that's a strong conventional puller. Now, what I would be, what makes sense coming from a conventional background is to see a really strong posterior chain, to see these knees really far back, and to see a rather high hip height. Now, again, like, you're going to be probably stronger like this, at least for now. So I don't necessarily think you really need to change much, but what I would do is I would experiment with pulling yourself a little bit lower, letting your knees travel a little bit further forward, and getting a little bit more upright to build more of that leverage advantage with the sumo deadlift, right? That's one of the reasons people like the sumo deadlift. One of the reasons it can be advantageous is because we can get a little more knees forward, we can get a little bit more upright. But, that being said, it depends what you're trying to do with your sumo. If you're trying to use your sumo to build your conventional, then I would definitely stay back. Keep doing it like you are. If conventional is your focus. If you're trying to build the most efficient sumo you can, then we might want to see a little bit more knees forward, a little bit more upright positioning. But I mean, everything you're doing with your back and your upper body looks great. You can see one of the things that I often coach and try to get people to understand is long arms, right? And obviously I think Patrick has genetically long arms, like the actual distance from his shoulder to his wrist is long. But one of the things he's doing here is he's doing a good job of not only depressing, but also protracting his shoulder blades a little bit, right? So kind of letting the arms almost hang a little bit forward, which allows him a really good sort of leveraged position off the floor and a really low lockout, right? Some people will shrug up, they'll pull their shoulders back at lockout, a lot of unnecessary movements. But one of the reasons I think Patrick's deadlift is so good is because he does a really good job with his shoulder positioning. So maybe that's a note that people can take away from that. Our next video comes from Armo. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I know, I get that. I get people's names wrong all the time. So Armo, if I'm messing it up, then I apologize. But so Armo's young fella here. He's 16 years old. He's been lifting for 4 years, doing mostly bodybuilding stuff. So I mean, that's pretty sick, right? Like, you started lifting at 12. You have a 9-year start on me, so you might be going places, my man. Powerlifting 5 months. He says he just got into a new gym and has never squatted before because in his old gyms he didn't have a squat rack, but now he does. He's getting into some squats and wants us to kind of take a look at it here. So the first thing I'm seeing is that we are kind of losing a lot of position in this sort of mid and low back. And what that tells me is that we probably need to look at what's going on with the stance, maybe wider, maybe more narrow, play with the toe angle. It's tough to see from here, from the side angle. I am really, really happy that you're getting good depth, right? Like top of the knee, crease of the hip. This to me looks like good powerlifting depth. I can't draw a straight line, but I think you know what I'm saying. It just looks like the bracing is I think what we need to work on. So when we start the squat, you see that you look up quite a bit and you're trying to get like a lot of arching in your back. And I think it's kind of counterintuitive, but if you looked down more, and again, we talk about this all the time, but try to pull the ribs down on top a little bit more, If you're looking for a good reference for that, we did a really great video with Liz Craven on our YouTube channel. You can just look up Calgary Barbell Liz Craven and it should pop up. But in that, she talks about how she positions her pelvis and rib cage to try to like stack up and create a column, as opposed to seeing this kind of like extended pattern that then turns into this flexed pattern in the bottom, right? So by allowing or starting with a little bit more flexion instead of a lot of extension, we kind of end up staying in a more neutral range throughout. So that would be my biggest recommendation for you. The other thing is, I think we're a little bit shrugged up in the shoulders. So I would again like play with your grip width, play with where you're cueing your elbows and what you're doing with your shoulder blades in the back. Try pulling the shoulder blades together, try pulling them down, and try to like get that chest nice and open, and then work on the bracing. And I think it's going to come along. Now that being said, you know, the basics, the mechanics of your squat are pretty damn good. It's just the bracing. It's mostly just the trunk that I think you need some work on. Other than that, I think you got strong legs. You know, we can see that your knees stay forward really well, right? That's one thing that I think you do exceptionally well, is even on that last rep where it starts to get hard, or I guess the third rep, we're doing more here. We don't see a huge like shooting back, that like very typical squat morning kind of pattern. I think you do a really good job staying in the quads. You got strong legs. We just got to work on that bracing and that trunk a little bit. So this is Cheyenne, and she's doing some bench press. She says she recently got into powerlifting 4 months ago. She says her first meet is at the end of March, and this is a set of 6 at about RPE 6. She's concerned her butt's coming up off the bench and that she might be using too much leg drive. So we're going to take a look here and see what this looks like. So right out of the rack, I think we can, you know, I think this left wrist, the right wrist actually looks good. We got that little bit of an angle to it, right? So it's a little bit crooked back. The left, I think we're trying to keep that wrist super straight, and a lot of the times that's going to put that bar out in front of you, whereas if we let the wrist cock back a little bit, it's going to keep that bar right over the wrist, right over the forearm. So I would let this elbow kind of break back a little bit instead of trying to be so straight through with that elbow. But the other thing is, depending on what federation you're competing in, you might need to get your feet flat on the ground. One of the things I recommend for people who like to toe pick but need to get their feet flat is the use of a squat shoe or a heeled lifting shoe. That can help you get a little bit of that feeling of your heel off the ground, but you know, the sole of the shoe is in contact with the floor, so provide some advantage and comfort there. So it looks to me like we probably just need to practice more. I think it just looks like you're 4 months into benching, right? I don't think there's any like huge errors. Like I said, definitely look into the rules of your federation, see if you can have your feet like this. You might need them flat on the ground. And if so, I recommend probably pointing your toes out a little bit to get your feet flat. I think your leg drive is great. I don't think your butt's coming up off the bench. It's always tough with people with really big arches because it's like, okay, is this contact or does this need to be contact? But as long as your hips are on the bench and you can't like see daylight under your butt, it's usually pretty good. It's usually fine. So yeah, I think the biggest thing here is just figuring out, okay, how much do we need to tuck the elbows versus flare the elbows? Where is our touch point on the chest? Because I think a number of these reps touch in different spots, right? And just being, you know, a little bit more controlled, keeping the back nice and tight. So what I would do is I would maybe practice some tempo work. I think would be a really good thing for you. Something like a 3-2-1 bench. So 3 count eccentric on the way down, a 2 count on the chest, and then a press. So again, just like incorporating a little bit more movement practice, maybe some triples with that movement or something like that. And it does look like, yeah, we maybe have a little bit too much tuck in the elbows on the way down, right? Some we flare a little bit better, and then we flare, you know, appropriately on the way back up. But it just looks like most reps are different from most other reps. So that to me is just, okay, we just need some practice, right? We just need to spend some more time doing the lift more than we need any sort of specific cueing. Like I said, I would play with your foot position. I would play with that wrist, make sure that we allow it to cock back a little bit. And I would just play with, you know, practicing more often. If you can add in an extra bench day, some like nice light RPE 6 work, then I think practicing a little bit more often is a good way to help speed up that process of just kind of learning the basics of the movement. All right, so up next is Helena. And Helena's from Sweden. She says she's not a powerlifter and has no intention to be. Started training in the summer of 2020, and she's really struggling to find the wedge feeling. She talked a little bit about not really feeling it in her hips, not really feeling it in her lats. And she says her 1RM is 90, and this is 80 for a set of 5. So one of the things, the biggest thing I'm noticing here is this looks a lot like Patrick's deadlift, right? We're very much back behind the bar, and I think we can pull ourselves down more. Even if that means the knees come forward, I think, again, that's going to get us more upright and probably make us a little bit more efficient. And it might also help us get some more feeling in the legs and feeling in the lats and some of those kinds of things of you know, sort of perceiving our tightness a little bit better. Let's play here. So what's happening is, yeah, we're really far back behind the bar. It looks like a pretty good wedge position. Honestly, I would it's interesting that you're in this kind of like hips high wedge position and you're not feeling the wedge, because a lot of the times people tend to feel a little bit more wedged with that hip higher position. So what I'm going to recommend, like I said, is getting your hips lower, allowing your knees forward a little bit. And also, as we go through to this last rep, we kind of get pulled out forward, right? So that tells me that, yeah, we're kind of like trying to float above the bar as opposed to actively pulling in this way. So what I want you to do is, when you get into this position, just pull your lats and try to imagine you're connecting your shoulder blade down into your hips, right? And maybe lift your gaze up a little bit, right? Looks like you're looking pretty much down here right now. Maybe look a little bit out, lift your head up a little bit, and try to get just a little bit more extension and pull those shoulder blades down into your hip. And that should help us get a lot more sensation through the posterior chain and have us feeling like we're wedging, as well as give us a little bit more of an upright, potentially leverage advantage position. All right. And now we have David. So David started powerlifting 6 or 7 months ago, switched to low bar about 3 months ago. And this is 90 kilos for 3 sets of 6. I think he said this was his final set he sent in. And the 1RM, he says, is his actual 1RM is higher than the max that's estimated by the work he does, I think is what he was saying. I was a little bit unclear what exactly he was talking about in the email, but generally speaking, when we have estimations that are off one way or the other, whether it's inflated or deflated, what I mean by that is if the E1RM appears higher than what you're capable of, or appears lower than what you're capable of, a lot of the times it's just because we're not good at one end of the spectrum, right? If you're doing 6s and they project you a way higher max than what you can do, you're probably not very good at singles, but you are very good at 6s. If you're doing 6s and they project you way lower than what you're actually capable of in a max, then chances are you're just not very good at 6s, right? So I would say that, you know, in whatever rep range seems to be deficient, maybe put a little bit more practice in there and try to get those things evened out a little bit. Or, you know, some people are just better at reps. So I would adjust your estimations based on the assumption that you are or aren't good at a certain rep range. So that way you can, again, have more accurate estimations. The biggest thing I'm seeing here, David, is we're really dropping into the bottom. I think we could very much control our descent and control our bottom position better. I think we're probably a fair bit too wide here. It's kind of tough to see, but your feet are really collapsing inwards when you hit the bottom, and that's causing a fair bit of lost positioning here. And I think the knees are maybe in a bit of a weird position as well. You're very like externally rotated in the knees. And I think, yeah, we're running into a little bit of difficulty when we get towards depth. So yeah, what I would do is probably, I think your upper back position looks okay. I think for the most part, your brace is good and how you're initiating the squat. The biggest things I would change is I would bring this stance in a little bit, and I would try to control your movement a little bit more. Kind of like I was talking to Cheyenne about the bench. I would also implement some tempo work here. I would use the same tempo, 3-2-0, and have you know, nice, slow, controlled eccentric, isometric pause in the bottom, and then stand back up. But I think part of the reason we're seeing some inconsistencies, maybe with our estimations, is that, you know, we're seeing a fair bit of variance rep to rep. A lot of these we're kind of swinging forward in the bottom, and then we're having to get back into sort of a more horizontal position to try to, regain some leverage advantage or some power against the bar. And I think that that's probably the couple of biggest things that I would try there, buddy. So try those out, and I really do hope that helps. So we're gonna look at Ethan now. So Ethan's a 59 kilo lifter from New Jersey. He says his technique varies week to week. The benches in his gym, as you can tell, we're at just a sort of public or what's the word? Like a Globo gym, a box gym kind of deal. He says the benches aren't the best at his gym. He's got a really wide grip, so it makes unracking really tough. He finds it hard to get a good arch and shoulder position. And again, probably partly at least because of that rack. And that he feels fairly unstable in his bench press. So this is 165 pounds, I believe. Yeah, 165 pounds for 5 at about 7 or 8 RPE. And he's just wondering what he can improve and how he can get a little bit better at the bench. So if everybody watching wants to go ahead and head down to the comments below, leave some constructive criticisms for Ethan, and I will start next video with Ethan's bench press and give my 2 cents on it. But let's see what y'all can pick out. All right, that's going to be it for this week. Stay tuned for Form Check Friday. And like I said, if you like this kind of content, come on by the live stream, twitch.tv/Calgary Barbell. And I swear, one day, hopefully, one day soon, we will have apparel. I hope. Please. All we do is sit around and wait for apparel. You think you're impatient? You think you want apparel? We want apparel. We want it so bad. Please, gods of apparel, apparel gods, deliver us our apparel.